Elena Marsh gripped the edge of the table as 12 pairs of eyes stared at her, waiting for her to break. She did not break. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her face stayed still, calm, almost cold. Behind her, the doors of the great hall were shut and guarded. There was no way out except forward, into whatever verdict was coming. Damian Wolfe stood at the head of the room, wearing the black coat that marked him as Alpha King of the Blackthorn Pack. He did not look at her. He looked past her, over her shoulder, as if she were already a memory he wanted to forget. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of standing beside him through wars, and treaties, and sleepless nights, and now, he could not even meet her eyes. "The council has reviewed the evidence," said Elder Corbin, an old wolf with silver hair and tired eyes. He held a folder in his hands, thin, almost weightless, yet it carried the power to end everything Elena had built. "The claim is that Luna Elena conspired with an outside pack to steal medicine meant for our wounded warriors. 60 vials of healing serum, gone, while soldiers suffered without treatment." Elena's stomach turned. It was a lie so absurd she almost laughed, except laughing here would be seen as guilt. "I never touched that serum," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I was in the East Wing, with the healers, the entire night it went missing. Ask any of them." "We did," Corbin said quietly. "2 of the healers changed their statements this morning." Elena's eyes flicked toward the shadows near the far wall, where a woman stood half-hidden, her golden hair catching the light from the tall windows. Seraphine. She wore an expression of practiced sorrow, dabbing at eyes that were not actually wet. Elena had seen this woman smile at Damian, in ways a stranger should never smile at a married alpha. She had voiced her concerns once, gently, carefully, and Damian had waved it away as jealousy. Now she understood. This was not carelessness. This was a plan, built slowly, brick by brick, until the walls closed in around her with no room to escape. "Damian," Elena said, turning to him directly, refusing to let the council pretend she was invisible. "Look at me. You know I would never harm this pack. I have given everything to this pack." For 1 second, something flickered across his face. Doubt, maybe. Old affection, maybe. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the mask of the Alpha King, who could not afford to look weak in front of his people. "The evidence is troubling," Damian said, his voice flat, distant, like he was reciting words someone else had written for him. "I cannot ignore 2 witness statements and a trail of communication logs that point to contact with the Ravenswood pack." "Communication logs," Elena repeated, disbelief cutting through her control for the first time. "What communication logs? I have never spoken to anyone from Ravenswood in my life." Corbin opened the folder and slid a single page across the table. Elena picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a printed record of messages, her name at the top, dates that lined up with nights she remembered clearly, nights spent doing paperwork alone in her study, while Damian was away on patrol. The messages inside were fabricated nonsense, vague references to serum and payment, written in a tone that did not even sound like her. "This is forged," she said. "Anyone with basic skill could create this." "An investigation would take weeks," Corbin said. "The wounded do not have weeks. The pack needs an answer today." Elena looked around the room, searching for a single ally, a single face that showed doubt about this rushed judgment. She found none. Fear had a way of making people quiet, and quiet people did not challenge a king, even when they suspected he was wrong. She looked again at Seraphine, who had lowered her eyes now, the picture of a grieving bystander, and Elena felt something cold settle into her chest. This was no longer about medicine or evidence. This was about removing her, and everyone in the room either did not see it or chose not to. "Damian," she said again, softer this time, reaching for the man underneath the crown, the one who used to fall asleep with his hand over her heart, the one who used to tell her she was the only home he had ever known. "Please, think about this. Think about us." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the softness she was hoping for was gone, replaced by something hard and final. "As Alpha King, I have a duty to this pack that comes before anything personal," he said. "Elena Voss, you are stripped of your title as Luna, effective immediately. You are exiled from Blackthorn territory, effective at dawn tomorrow. You may not return without express permission from the council, on penalty of severe punishment. The room went silent. Even the guards at the door seemed to hold their breath. Elena felt the words hit her like physical blows, one after another, until she was not sure she was still standing on her own strength, or simply frozen in place by shock. 5 years, she whispered, more to herself than to him. 5 years, and this is what I am worth to you. Damien did not answer. He turned his back to her, facing the window instead, as if the mountains outside were more important than the woman he was throwing away. Elena searched his shoulders for any sign of hesitation, any small movement that might mean he wanted to take the words back. There was none. He stood like a statue, cold and unmoving, while behind him, hidden in the shadows, Seraphine allowed herself the smallest, most private smile. Elena did not cry. She refused to give any of them that satisfaction. Instead, she straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked toward the door without waiting for permission. 2 guards moved to escort her, but she raised a hand. I know the way out, she said. I have walked these halls for 5 years. I do not need help finding the door. The guards stepped aside, unsure whether to feel relief or shame. Elena walked past them, past the long tables where pack members used to greet her with warmth and respect, past portraits of alphas long dead, who had once ruled with honor she no longer believed existed in this hall. Her footsteps echoed against the stone floor, steady and unhurried, even though her entire world had just been ripped apart in the span of a few sentences. Outside the hall, the cold evening air hit her face like a slap, waking her from the numbness that had wrapped around her mind. She walked toward the private quarters she had shared with Damien for half a decade, aware that guards were now following her at a distance, making sure she did not linger longer than necessary. She did not look back at them. She did not have the energy to care what they thought of her. Inside her room, Elena packed only what she needed. A few clothes. A small photograph of her parents, long gone, the only family she had left before she joined this pack. A simple silver ring that had belonged to her mother. She left behind the jewelry Damien had given her, the dresses made for royal ceremonies, anything that reminded her of a life built on a foundation that had just crumbled beneath her feet. As she packed, memories rushed at her uninvited. The night Damien proposed on the cliffside overlooking the northern forest, promising her forever, under a sky full of stars. The day she was named Luna, standing beside him as the pack howled in celebration. The quiet mornings when he would trace circles on her back and whisper that she made him a better leader, a better man. All of it now felt like a cruel joke, a story written about 2 people who no longer existed. A soft knock came at her door. She expected a guard, but instead found her closest friend, Marissa, a healer who had served the pack since Elena's very first day. Marissa's eyes were red, her hands trembling as she stepped inside. I did not sign that statement, Marissa whispered urgently. They forged my signature. I swear to you, Elena, I never said any of those things. I believe you, Elena said, and she meant it. But it does not matter now. The decision is made. You cannot just leave, Marissa said, gripping her arm. Let me speak to the council. Let me tell them the truth. They do not want the truth, Elena said gently, pulling her hand free. They want a quick solution, and I am that solution. Fighting it will only put you in danger too. Marissa's tears finally fell, and she pulled Elena into a tight hug. I will find proof, she promised. I will not stop until I clear your name. Elena held onto her friend for a long moment, grateful for at least one true heart in a hall full of cowards and liars. Thank you, she whispered. But promise me, you will be careful. Whoever did this is not finished. When Marissa finally left, Elena sat alone on the edge of the bed she used to share with the man who had just exiled her. She allowed herself exactly 1 minute to feel the full weight of her grief, 1 minute to let the tears fall freely, silently, without anyone watching. Then she wiped her face, stood up, and locked away the pain where no one could use it against her. The night passed slowly. Elena did not sleep. She sat by the window, watching the moon travel across the sky, memorizing the shape of the mountains she had come to think of as home. She wondered if Damien was sleeping soundly in the next room, or if guilt was keeping him awake as it should. She wondered if Seraphine was already celebrating, already imagining herself standing where Elena once stood. At dawn, exactly as ordered, 2 guards arrived to escort her to the border. Elena walked out of the pack house one last time, her small bag slung over her shoulder, her back straight despite the ache in her chest. Pack members lined the path, some looking away in shame, others whispering behind their hands. She did not acknowledge any of them. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to let this final walk be anything other than an act of quiet dignity. At the border stone, Damien was waiting. Elena's breath caught, unprepared to see him there after everything. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes deeper than she remembered from the night before. For a brief moment, hope flickered inside her, foolish and stubborn, whispering that perhaps this was the moment he would say it had all been a mistake, that he would ask her to stay. Instead, he simply said, "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Something inside Elena finally hardened into stone. "You made it hard," she said quietly. "I am simply walking away." She crossed the border stone without looking back, stepping from the only home she had known for 5 years, into unknown territory, into a life she would have to build from nothing. Behind her, she heard the pack gates close with a heavy, final sound, sealing away everything she had once believed was permanent. She walked for hours, following the old trading road that led toward the distant cities beyond the northern packs. Her legs ached, her stomach growled with hunger she refused to acknowledge, and still she walked, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant breaking, and she could not afford to break yet. By late afternoon, exhaustion finally caught up with her. The temperature had dropped sharply as she climbed higher into unfamiliar hills, and her thin jacket did little against the biting wind. Her vision blurred at the edges. Her steps grew unsteady. She told herself to keep going just a little further, just to the next bend in the road, but her body had other plans. Elena's knees buckled, and the world tilted sideways as she collapsed onto the frozen ground, the last of her strength finally spent. Her final clear thought, before darkness swallowed her vision, was not of the exile, or the false evidence, or even Damien's cold eyes. It was a quiet, stubborn whisper deep inside her chest, insisting that this was not the end of her story, only the end of one terrible chapter. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard footsteps approaching, fast and urgent, followed by a low voice calling out words she could no longer understand. Then there was nothing at all. Elena woke to warmth. That was the first thing she noticed. The strange, unfamiliar comfort of blankets pulled tight around her body, and a fire crackling somewhere nearby. For a moment, she thought she was back in her old room in Blackthorn territory, and her heart lifted with foolish hope before reality crashed back in. She opened her eyes slowly. The room was small, made of simple wood, nothing like the stone halls she had grown up in. A narrow window let in soft gray light, suggesting either early morning or late evening. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious. "You are awake," said a voice from the doorway. Elena turned her head and saw a man leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching her with quiet curiosity. He was tall, with dark hair and calm brown eyes that held none of the coldness she had grown used to in her final days at Blackthorn. I was starting to worry. "Where am I?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. "My cabin," he said. "About a day's walk from the Blackthorn border. I found you collapsed on the road. You were half frozen. Another hour out there and you might not have survived." Elena pushed herself up slowly, testing her strength. Her body ached everywhere, but nothing felt broken. "Thank you," she said, meaning it deeply despite her caution. "I owe you my life." "You owe me nothing," the man said, stepping further into the room, and setting down a cup of something warm on the small table beside her bed. "My name is Callum. I used to run supply routes between the northern packs before I decided city life suited me better. Now I mostly keep to myself out here." Elena studied him carefully, searching for any sign of danger, any reason to distrust him. She found none, only genuine concern in his expression. "Elena," she said finally, deciding a first name was safe enough to share. "Thank you for the help, Callum. I will not trouble you for long. I just need to rest a little, then I will be on my way." "There is no rush," Callum said. "Whatever you are running from, it looks like it took a lot out of you. Rest as long as you need." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup he offered, grateful for the simple kindness of a stranger after the betrayal of people she had trusted for years. She did not tell him her full story, not yet, not when the wounds were still so raw. Instead, she let herself sip the warm drink in silence, watching the fire dance in the small hearth, allowing herself, for the first time since the trial, to simply breathe. Over the following days, Elena slowly regained her strength. Callum proved to be quiet company, never prying, never pushing her to explain more than she wanted to share. He gave her space to heal, brought her food without complaint, and treated her with a steady respect that felt foreign after the humiliation of her final days in Blackthorn. On the fourth night, as they sat by the fire sharing a simple meal, Elena finally found the courage to speak. "I was exiled," she said quietly, "from my pack, accused of something I did not do." Callum did not react with shock or judgment, only nodded slowly, giving her room to continue if she wished. "That explains the state you were in when I found you," he said. "You do not have to tell me more, if you are not ready." "I was married to the Alpha," Elena continued anyway, the words spilling out now that she had started. 5 years. I gave everything to that pack, and in the end, he believed lies over the truth, because it was easier than facing what was really happening around him. "Sounds like a coward," Callum said simply. No judgment in his tone, just honest observation. Elena almost laughed, surprised by the bluntness. "He used to be different," she said softly. "Or maybe I only saw what I wanted to see." "People change," Callum said. "Or sometimes they show you exactly who they are, and we choose not to believe it until we no longer have a choice." Elena considered his words carefully, feeling a strange sense of relief in speaking them aloud to someone with no stake in her old life, no loyalty pulling them toward Blackthorn or away from it. "What will you do now?" Callum asked after a long pause. "I do not know," Elena admitted. "I cannot go back. I have no family left, no pack willing to take in someone exiled under such serious accusations. I suppose I need to build something new, somewhere far from all of this." "There is a city 3 days south of here," Callum said. "Ashwick, large enough that no one asks too many questions about where you came from. I have connections there, if you want them. It might be a good place to start over." Elena looked at him carefully, weighing the offer. She had no reason to trust anyone completely anymore, but something about Callum's steady honesty made her believe he meant what he said. "Why would you help me like this?" she asked. "You do not know me." "Because someone helped me once, a long time ago, when I had nothing," Callum said simply. Seemed only right to pass it forward when the chance came along. 3 days later, once Elena felt strong enough to travel, Callum walked with her to the outskirts of Ashwick, a sprawling city unlike anything she had seen in her sheltered years within Blackthorn territory. Tall buildings rose against the horizon, streets bustling with people from dozens of different backgrounds, none of them concerned with pack politics or royal bloodlines. It felt like an entirely different world. "This is where I leave you," Callum said as they reached the edge of the city. "There is a contact here named Petra, runs a business training program for newcomers. Tell her I sent you. She owes me a favor." Elena felt a lump form in her throat, unexpected gratitude for a man who had asked for nothing in return. "I do not know how to thank you properly," she said. "Build a good life," Callum said simply. "That is thanks enough." He turned and walked back the way they came, disappearing into the tree line without another word, leaving Elena standing alone at the entrance to a city that held no memory of her past, no expectation of who she used to be. For the first time since her exile, she felt something other than grief. She felt the smallest flicker of possibility. She found Petra's office by late afternoon, a modest building tucked between a bakery and a tailor shop. Petra turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, quick to size people up and slow to trust, but Callum's name opened the door Elena needed. "Any experience with business, finance, negotiation?" Petra asked, studying Elena with an assessing gaze. "I managed resources and diplomacy for a large territory for 5 years, Elena said carefully, choosing her words to avoid revealing too much about her past. Budgets, trade agreements, conflict resolution between different groups. Petra raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed despite herself. "That is more experience than most people who walk through that door," she said. "I run a training program that places skilled newcomers into growing companies around the city. Give me 2 weeks to see what you can do, and we will discuss more permanent placement." Elena nodded, feeling a small spark of determination reignite inside her chest. The same steady resolve that had carried her through years of pack responsibilities, now redirected toward this new, unfamiliar challenge. "I will not disappoint you," she said. "See that you do not," Petra replied, though the corner of her mouth twitched upward slightly. the closest thing to a smile Elena had seen from her so far. That night, Elena rented a small room above a quiet shop, using the last of the money Callum had insisted she take before leaving him. She sat by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar city lights, and allowed herself to think, for just a moment, about everything she had lost, the pack she had loved, the mate she had trusted completely, the title that had once defined her entire identity. Then she pushed those thoughts aside, gently but firmly, the way she had learned to do over the past difficult days. Blackthorn was gone. Damien was gone. The woman who had once been Luna Elena Voss was gone, buried somewhere on that frozen road where Callum had found her. In her place stood someone new. Someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove. Elena Marsh, as she decided to call herself from that night forward, closed her eyes and allowed herself, finally, to sleep, without the weight of grief pressing down on her chest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and slowly, steadily, a life built entirely on her own terms. 2 weeks became 2 months, and 2 months became a year, faster than Elena had thought possible. Petra's training program had placed her at Hartwell Logistics, a mid-sized company that managed trade routes between the human cities and the Outer Pack territories. Elena's natural talent for negotiation, sharpened over years of managing pack disputes, made her a quick standout among the other trainees. Her supervisor, a sharp but fair man named Gideon Frost, noticed her potential almost immediately. "You handle conflict like someone who has done it for decades," he told her during her first quarterly review, flipping through the results of 3 difficult contract negotiations she had successfully closed. "Where did you learn to read people like that?" "Experience," Elena said simply, offering no further detail. Gideon did not push, respecting the privacy she guarded carefully around her past. In this new life, no one knew she had once been a Luna. No one knew about the false accusations, the forged evidence, or the husband who had chosen his mistress over the truth. Here, she was simply Elena Marsh, a talented and hard-working employee building a career from nothing. The work kept her mind occupied during the day, filling the hours with contracts, negotiations, and the steady rhythm of an office that had nothing to do with pack politics. The nights were harder. Alone in her small apartment, memories of Blackthorn crept back uninvited, sharp and painful despite the passage of time. She thought of Marissa often, wondering if her friend had ever managed to uncover proof of the forgery, wondering if it even mattered anymore. She learned, through careful and distant inquiries, that Blackthorn continued to function under Damien's rule, though rumors suggested trouble brewing within the pack. Resources seemed to be disappearing at unusual rates. Trade agreements that once ran smoothly now faced constant delays and complications. Elena told herself she did not care, that whatever happened to that pack was no longer her concern, but some quiet part of her still wondered, still worried for people she had once considered family. At Hartwell Logistics, Elena's reputation grew steadily. She developed a particular skill for identifying weaknesses in failing partnerships and restructuring them into profitable arrangements, a skill that earned her a rare promotion to senior negotiator within just 18 months of joining the company. Her colleagues respected her, though most found her difficult to know personally. She kept a polite distance from everyone, sharing meals and casual conversation, but never revealing the deeper wounds beneath her composed exterior. One colleague, a warm and persistent woman named Fiona from the accounting department, eventually broke through some of that careful distance. Fiona had a habit of bringing Elena tea during long working nights and asking gentle questions that never felt invasive, simply curious, in a way that suggested genuine friendship rather than gossip. "You never talk about your family," Fiona observed one evening, as they worked late reviewing quarterly reports together. "Or where you grew up, or anyone from before Ashwick." "Not much to tell," Elena said carefully, a practiced deflection she had used many times before. "Everyone has something to tell," Fiona said, not unkindly. "You do not have to share it with me. Just know that if you ever want to, I am here." Elena appreciated the offer more than she let on, storing away the small kindness like a treasure she was not yet ready to unpack. Trust came slowly to her now, built brick by careful brick, nothing like the reckless faith she had once placed in Damien without question. As her second year in Ashwick began, Elena's success at Hartwell Logistics caught the attention of a much larger company, Ravenhall Trade Consortium, one of the most respected trading powers operating across both human and pack territories. They offered her a director position overseeing negotiations with several pack territories in the northern region, a role that would place her closer to her old life than she had been since her exile, though safely removed from Blackthorn itself. Elena hesitated before accepting the position. Working so close to pack politics again meant risking exposure, risking encounters with people from her past who might recognize her despite the new name and the careful distance she had built. But the opportunity was too significant to refuse, both financially and professionally, and after years of quiet caution, Elena felt ready to take a calculated risk. She accepted the position at Ravenhall, and within months, proved herself an invaluable asset to the company. Her deep understanding of pack customs and internal politics, knowledge she never openly explained the source of, gave Ravenhall a significant advantage in negotiations that other human-run companies struggled to achieve. Contracts that had stalled for months under previous negotiators suddenly moved forward under Elena's careful guidance. It was during this time that Elena first heard direct news of Blackthorn's growing troubles, delivered casually during a business dinner with representatives from a neighboring pack territory. "Blackthorn is falling apart from the inside," one representative mentioned over dessert, clearly unaware of any connection Elena might have to the topic. "Their Alpha King has become distracted, some say obsessed with an advisor who has far too much influence over pack decisions. Resources keep disappearing, trade agreements keep failing, and morale within the pack is at an all-time low." Elena kept her expression carefully neutral, though her heart pounded rapidly beneath her composed exterior. "That sounds concerning," she said simply, encouraging the representative to continue, without revealing her personal investment in the topic. "Concerning is putting it mildly," the representative continued, clearly enjoying the gossip. "There are whispers of an internal challenge forming against the Alpha King's authority. Some believe the pack will not survive another year under his current leadership if things do not change drastically." Elena filed away every detail of that conversation, turning the information over carefully in her mind, long after the dinner ended. Part of her wanted to feel satisfaction, a sense of justice finally catching up with the people who had wronged her so completely. But a larger part of her felt only a heavy, complicated sadness, remembering the pack she had once loved, the people who had nothing to do with the lies that destroyed her marriage, now suffering under the consequences of decisions made by others. She thought of Marissa again that night, wondering how her old friend was faring amid the growing chaos, wondering if she was safe. The temptation to reach out, to send some quiet message checking on her well-being, pulled at Elena strongly, but she resisted, unwilling to risk unraveling the careful new life she had built with such difficulty. Instead, Elena threw herself further into her work at Ravenhall, using the discipline and focus that had always been her greatest strength to push aside the complicated emotions stirred up by news of her old home. She closed 3 major contracts within a single month, cementing her reputation as one of the most skilled negotiators the company had ever employed. Her director position soon expanded into oversight of the entire Northern Division, a role that came with significant authority and, notably, direct access to information about pack territories throughout the region. As her 3rd year in exile approached, Elena had built something she genuinely had not expected to build, a life of her own, defined entirely by her own choices, free from the shadow of a crown she never truly wanted in the first place. She had a career that challenged and fulfilled her, a small but growing circle of trusted friends including Fiona, and a quiet apartment overlooking the city that felt, for the first time in years, genuinely like home. She had also, slowly and carefully, allowed herself to heal. The sharp, constant ache of Damien's betrayal had softened into something more manageable, a scar, rather than an open wound. She no longer cried herself to sleep thinking about the life she had lost. She no longer wondered, late at night, whether she could have done something differently to save her marriage. She understood now, with clear and settled certainty, that the fault had never been hers to carry. Yet despite this hard-won peace, a small, stubborn part of Elena remained curious about the pack she had left behind, about the man who had once promised her forever, before choosing lies over truth. She told herself this curiosity meant nothing, that it was simply natural interest in news that occasionally crossed her path through work. She did not yet realize how soon that curiosity would be tested, or how completely her carefully rebuilt life was about to collide once again with the past she thought she had left behind for good. Back in Blackthorn territory, the pack that Elena had once called home was crumbling under the weight of decisions made in her absence. Seraphine had wasted no time securing her position beside Damien, moving into the role of trusted advisor within weeks of Elena's exile, then steadily expanding her influence until few important decisions were made without her input. At first, Damien told himself this closeness was simply practical, a natural result of Seraphine's willingness to step into responsibilities left vacant by Elena's absence. He ignored the growing discomfort of his pack elders, who watched Seraphine's rise with quiet suspicion. He ignored the whispers among the younger pack members, who noticed how quickly she had positioned herself at his side. Seraphine was clever, careful never to overstep in ways that might draw direct challenge. She built her influence slowly, offering advice that always seemed reasonable in the moment, suggesting decisions that appeared to benefit the pack while quietly serving her own hidden agenda. She encouraged Damien to distance himself from advisors who had served loyally for decades, framing them as outdated voices, resistant to necessary change. One by one, experienced counselors found themselves excluded from important meetings, replaced by newer faces more easily influenced by Seraphine's carefully constructed narrative. Elder Corbin, who had once presided so confidently over Elena's trial, found himself increasingly sidelined, his concerns dismissed, as the anxious worry of an old wolf, unable to adapt to new leadership styles. He tried repeatedly to warn Damien about the dangerous pattern forming within the pack's inner circle, but Damien, distracted by grief he refused to fully acknowledge, and increasingly dependent on Seraphine's constant reassurance, waved away every warning. The pack's resources began disappearing gradually, small discrepancies at first that seemed easy to explain away. Medicine shipments arrived short of their ordered quantities. Trade agreements negotiated by Seraphine's newly appointed allies consistently favored a mysterious third-party pack that few pack members had ever heard mentioned before. Funds meant for training young warriors mysteriously ran short, forcing budget cuts that weakened the pack's defensive capabilities at a time when tensions with neighboring territories were rising. Damien noticed these problems, of course, but Seraphine always had a ready explanation, always a reasonable-sounding solution that somehow required even greater trust be placed in her judgment. She positioned herself as indispensable, the only steady presence during a period of supposed instability, when in truth, she herself was the primary source of that instability. Marissa, meanwhile, had not given up on finding proof of the forgery that had destroyed Elena's reputation and marriage. She worked quietly, carefully, gathering information during her regular duties as head healer, comparing handwriting samples, tracking down old records, and building a case that grew more compelling with each passing month. She trusted no one within the current inner circle, understanding that revealing her efforts too soon could result in her own exile or worse. It was during one of these careful investigations that Marissa discovered something significant: financial records showing regular, unexplained transfers of pack funds to an account registered under a name that traced back, through several careful layers, to Seraphine's birth family. The discovery confirmed what Marissa had long suspected. Seraphine had not simply taken advantage of an opportunity created by Elena's downfall. She had orchestrated the entire situation from the beginning, manufacturing evidence and manipulating witnesses specifically to remove Elena and secure her own position beside the Alpha King. Marissa knew she needed powerful allies before confronting Damien directly, understanding that accusing his closest advisor, without airtight proof, would likely result in her own swift removal from the pack. She began quietly approaching other pack members, who had expressed private doubts about Seraphine's rapid rise to power, carefully building a coalition of concerned individuals, willing to support a formal investigation once sufficient evidence had been gathered. Meanwhile, tensions within the pack continued escalating. A young warrior named Dorian, respected among his peers for his honesty and combat skill, began openly questioning decisions made under Seraphine's influence during pack council meetings. His challenges grew bolder with each passing month, emboldened by growing support from warriors frustrated with weakened training resources and declining pack morale. Seraphine, sensing the growing threat Dorian represented, moved quickly to neutralize his influence. She convinced Damien that Dorian's public challenges represented a dangerous pattern of insubordination that could not be tolerated, framing legitimate concerns as personal ambition disguised as loyalty. Damien, worn down by months of stress and uncertain leadership, agreed to strip Dorian of his position within the Pack's Warrior Council, a decision that sent shockwaves through the ranks and further eroded confidence in the Alpha King's judgment. This harsh response backfired significantly. Rather than silencing dissent, it galvanized it. Warriors who had privately doubted Seraphine's influence now spoke more openly about their concerns, recognizing the pattern of anyone who challenged her authority being systematically removed or discredited. Marissa found her coalition growing faster than she had anticipated, as more pack members quietly reached out, sharing their own suspicions and small pieces of evidence that, combined together, painted an increasingly damning picture. Damien himself began showing visible signs of strain under the mounting pressure. He slept poorly, his temper grew shorter, and the confident leadership that had once defined his rule gave way to indecision and second-guessing. Late at night, alone in the private quarters he had once shared with Elena, memories of her steady counsel and honest advice crept back uninvited. Comparisons he tried desperately not to make between the wife he had exiled and the advisor who now filled her former role, though never quite filling the void she had left behind. He found himself, on more than one occasion, standing outside the room where Elena's old belongings had once been kept, now empty and cleared away on Seraphine's suggestion that keeping reminders of the past would only slow the Pack's necessary progress forward. He never told anyone about these quiet moments of doubt, burying them beneath the demands of daily leadership and Seraphine's constant, carefully calculated reassurance that he had made the right decision those years ago. Seraphine, aware of his occasional moments of uncertainty, worked harder to secure her position, subtly reminding Damien of the supposed evidence against Elena whenever his doubts seemed to surface, reinforcing the narrative she had constructed so carefully years before. She understood that her entire position depended on Damien never fully questioning the story that had justified Elena's exile, and she guarded that narrative fiercely, watching for any sign it might unravel. But narratives built on lies rarely hold forever, especially when determined people continue quietly pulling at their loose threads. Marissa's investigation was approaching a critical point, her evidence growing strong enough that she began considering the dangerous step of presenting it directly to the full Pack Council, understanding that doing so would place her in significant personal risk, but recognizing that the Pack's continued stability, and Elena's stolen honor, depended on the truth finally coming to light. As the Pack teetered on the edge of open rebellion, with warriors dividing into factions, resources continuing to mysteriously disappear, and an Alpha King increasingly isolated from honest counsel, the stage was being carefully set for a reckoning that had been 5 long years in the making. Somewhere far away in the bustling city of Ashwick, Elena Marsh had no idea just how close that reckoning had become, or how soon the past she thought she had left behind would come crashing back into her carefully rebuilt life. The rebellion within Blackthorn finally broke into the open on a cold evening during the Pack's annual council gathering, an event meant to celebrate unity, but which instead became the stage for the Pack's most dramatic confrontation in decades. Marissa had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering her coalition of allies and organizing the evidence into a presentation too thorough and too damning to be easily dismissed. The Great Hall was filled to capacity that evening, Pack members from every rank gathering to witness what many had already sensed would be a turning point. Damien sat at the head table, Seraphine beside him as always, both unaware of the storm about to break over their heads. Elder Corbin, who had quietly aligned himself with Marissa's coalition after learning the extent of her findings, called the meeting to order, with unusual gravity in his voice. "Before we proceed with tonight's regular business," Corbin announced, his old eyes scanning the room with careful purpose, "there is a matter of urgent importance that must be addressed. Head healer Marissa has requested time to present evidence relevant to a decision made by this council 5 years ago." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Damien's expression shifted from mild confusion to visible alarm as he glanced toward Seraphine, who had gone unnaturally still beside him. "This is highly irregular," Seraphine said quickly, her voice carrying just enough sharpness to draw attention. "Reopening old matters serves no purpose, except to distract from the Pack's current challenges." "With respect," Marissa said, stepping forward with a thick folder clutched firmly in her hands, "I believe this matter is directly connected to many of the Pack's current challenges." Damien's jaw tightened, but he gestured for Marissa to continue. Curiosity and old, buried guilt overriding his hesitation. Marissa spread her evidence across the table before the council, methodically walking through each piece with the same careful precision she used in treating patients. She presented the forged communication logs alongside genuine samples of Elena's actual handwriting and writing style, highlighting inconsistencies that any careful examination would have caught if anyone had bothered to look closely 5 years earlier. She then revealed the financial records tracing unexplained fund transfers directly to accounts connected with Seraphine's family, laid out in clear, undeniable detail that left little room for alternative explanations. Finally, she called forward 2 witnesses, healers who had originally signed the false statements against Elena, who now, with visible fear, but growing courage, admitted publicly that they had been coerced and threatened into signing documents they had never actually witnessed. The great hall fell into stunned silence. Damien stared at the evidence spread before him, his face draining of color as the full weight of what he was seeing settled into understanding. He looked up at Seraphine, searching for some explanation, some denial that might make sense of what he was witnessing. "This is absurd," Seraphine said, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence, replaced by a note of genuine panic. "Forged documents can easily be created to frame anyone. This proves nothing except that someone wants to discredit me." "The financial records are independently verifiable," Corbin said quietly, his tone carrying the weight of finality. "Anyone can request an audit through the human banking authorities that oversee cross-territory transfers. I have already done so. The results confirm exactly what has been presented here tonight." Damien's hands trembled as he picked up the audit confirmation Corbin slid toward him, reading it slowly, absorbing words that shattered 5 years of assumed truth in a matter of seconds. He looked up at Seraphine one final time, his expression transforming from confusion into something colder, harder, filled with a dawning realization of just how thoroughly he had been manipulated. "You did this," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying enough weight that the entire hall heard every word. "You orchestrated all of it, the stolen serum, the forged logs, the false witnesses, all of it, just to remove Elena and take her place." Seraphine's carefully maintained composure finally cracked completely. "She never deserved this position," Seraphine spat, abandoning all pretense of innocence now that denial had become impossible. "She was cold, distant, always more concerned with pack politics than with truly loving you. I gave you everything she never could." The hall erupted into chaos, pack members shouting, some in anger, others in shock, as 5 years of carefully constructed lies finally collapsed in full view of everyone who had lived under their consequences. Damien sat frozen at the head table, staring at the woman who had shared his bed and his throne for 5 years, understanding for the first time the true depth of her manipulation. "Take her into custody," Damien finally commanded, his voice raw with barely contained fury. Guards moved quickly to restrain Seraphine, who continued shouting accusations and justifications even as she was led from the hall, her carefully built empire of lies crumbling completely in the span of a single evening. Once the immediate chaos settled, Damien remained seated at the head table for a long time, staring blankly at the evidence still spread before him. The full weight of what he had done finally crashed down upon him with devastating clarity. He had exiled his true mate, the woman who had given him 5 years of genuine loyalty and love, based entirely on lies fabricated by someone who had wanted her removed from the very beginning. He had chosen convenience and comfort over the difficult work of seeking real truth, and in doing so, he had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Where is she now?" he asked Corbin quietly, once the hall had mostly emptied. "Elena, does anyone know where she went?" "No one has heard from her since her exile," Corbin said gently, watching his Alpha King with something between pity and disappointment. "She disappeared completely. Whether by choice or necessity, she made certain no one from Blackthorn could easily find her." Damien closed his eyes, the guilt settling into his chest like a physical weight he would carry for the rest of his life. "I need to find her," he said, more to himself than to Corbin. "I need to make this right, whatever it takes, however long it takes." "Finding her will not undo 5 years of exile," Corbin said, not unkindly, simply stating a difficult truth Damien needed to hear. "And she may not want to be found, especially not by the man who chose lies over her word, without a single moment of real doubt." Damien absorbed this warning silently, understanding the fairness of it, even as determination hardened within him. Whatever it took, however long the search required, however difficult the path toward earning back trust he had shattered so completely, he intended to find Elena and prove to her, beyond any doubt, exactly how deeply he regretted the choice that had cost him everything that truly mattered. In the weeks that followed, the pack slowly began healing from the chaos Seraphine's manipulation had caused. Dorian was reinstated to the Warrior Council with a formal apology, and additional advisors who had been unfairly sidelined found their voices welcomed back into important decisions. Damien worked tirelessly to repair the damage done during his years of distracted leadership, but even as the pack's external problems began resolving, an internal restlessness continued growing within him, a relentless need to find the woman he had wronged so completely. He began quietly funding a search effort, reaching out through trusted contacts in neighboring territories and human cities, following any lead, however small, that might point toward Elena's whereabouts. Progress was slow and frustrating, made more difficult by the fact that Elena had clearly taken great care to disappear completely, changing her name and avoiding any connection back to pack territories that might expose her location. Months turned into years as the search continued without success. Damien's guilt and determination never wavering despite the lack of progress. He ruled his pack with renewed wisdom and humility, having learned painful but valuable lessons about the dangers of blind trust and the importance of seeking real truth rather than convenient explanations. Yet privately, the unresolved wound of Elena's exile never fully healed, a constant reminder of the worst decision he had ever made, driving him forward in a search that seemed increasingly hopeless with each passing season. 5 years after her exile, Elena Marsh stood at the podium of a grand conference hall in the city of Ashwick, addressing a room full of executives and pack representatives gathered for the annual Cross-Territory Trade Summit. She had risen to become one of Ravenhall Trade Consortium's most respected directors, known throughout the region for her sharp negotiating skills and her rare, valuable understanding of pack customs and politics. She wore a tailored dark green suit, her hair pulled back in a simple, elegant style, every inch the picture of composed professional success. As she spoke, outlining a new framework for resource-sharing agreements between human cities and pack territories, she projected complete confidence, giving no outward sign of the woman who had once collapsed on a frozen road, broken and exiled from everything she had known. This summit was significant for another reason as well. For the first time since her arrival in Ashwick, representatives from Blackthorn territory had been invited to participate, part of a broader effort to rebuild trade relationships that had suffered during years of internal instability within their pack. Elena had known this in advance, had considered declining her own attendance, but ultimately decided that avoiding the summit indefinitely was neither practical nor necessary. 5 years had passed. She was a different person now, with a different name and a different life. She told herself she could handle whatever brief, distant contact this summit might bring. She had not, however, anticipated that Damien himself would attend in person, rather than sending a lower-level representative as he had done in previous years. Nor had she anticipated how her body would react the moment she saw him enter the hall during a break between sessions, older now, lines of stress visible around his eyes that had not been there 5 years earlier, yet still unmistakably him. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs, her carefully composed professional mask nearly slipping before she forced herself back into control. She turned away quickly, hoping to avoid direct contact, hoping the crowded hall might allow her to simply disappear into the background until the summit concluded. Fate, however, had other plans. During the afternoon networking session, as Elena discussed contract details with a representative from a neighboring territory, she felt a presence approach from behind, and something in her wolf instincts, buried but never fully extinguished despite years of careful suppression, recognized him before she even turned around. "Elena," Damien said, his voice barely above a whisper, disbelief evident in every syllable. "Elena, is it really you?" She turned slowly, forcing her expression into calm neutrality, despite the storm crashing through her chest. "It is Elena Marsh now," she said evenly, meeting his eyes directly for the first time in 5 years. "I believe we have not been properly introduced, Alpha King Wolf." Damien looked as though she had struck him, the formal distance in her tone landing like a physical blow. "Elena," he said again, ignoring her correction, searching her face for any sign of the woman he remembered. "I have been searching for you for years. I did not know if you were even alive." "As you can see, I am quite well," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the effort it took to maintain that steadiness. "If you will excuse me, I have other commitments to attend to." She began to turn away, but Damien reached out, not quite touching her, stopping just short of contact, as though some remaining respect for boundaries prevented him from crossing that final distance. "Please," he said, urgency breaking through his carefully controlled tone. "Just a few minutes. There is so much you deserve to know, so much I need to explain." Elena hesitated, torn between the years of practiced distance she had built and a curiosity she could not quite suppress about what exactly had happened after her exile that might warrant such urgent explanation. Finally, she nodded once, curtly. 10 minutes, she said. "In the side conference room. I have a meeting scheduled after that I cannot miss." They walked in silence to a small private room adjacent to the main hall, the tension between them thick enough to feel physically present in the air. Once the door closed behind them, Damien turned to face her fully, and for a moment, words seemed to fail him entirely. "The truth came out," he finally said. "About Seraphine. About the forged evidence. Everything you told me that day was true, and I chose not to believe you." Elena's expression remained carefully controlled, though something flickered behind her eyes at the confirmation of what she had long suspected. "I know about the accusations against Seraphine," she said. "News travels, even to those who are exiled." "Then you know I have spent 5 years trying to find you," Damien said, stepping closer, though Elena held her ground without retreating. "I need you to know how deeply I regret what I did. I chose fear and convenience over trust in the woman who had given me everything. There is no excuse good enough to explain that failure." "No," Elena agreed simply. "There is not." Damien absorbed the sharpness of her response without flinching, understanding it as exactly the reaction his actions had earned. "I am not asking you to forgive me," he said. "I know that may not even be possible after everything. I simply needed you to know the truth, and to know how sorry I am for failing you so completely when you needed my trust most." Elena studied him for a long moment, seeing the genuine anguish in his expression, recognizing the man she had once loved deeply, now worn down by years of guilt and regret. Part of her, the part that had spent countless nights grieving the life and love she had lost, wanted to soften, wanted to accept his apology and imagine some path back toward what they once shared. But a larger, stronger part of her, forged through 5 years of rebuilding herself entirely from nothing, remembered exactly how it felt to stand before that council, begging him to simply believe her, and watching him choose otherwise without any real struggle. "Thank you for the apology," she said finally, her voice steady and controlled. "I appreciate you telling me the truth, but I built a life without you, Damien. A good life, one I am genuinely proud of. I am not the same woman you exiled 5 years ago, and I am not interested in revisiting a past that nearly destroyed me." She turned toward the door, intending to end the conversation there, but Damien's voice stopped her one final time. "I understand if you cannot forgive me," he said quietly, "but please, at least allow me the chance to know you are safe, to know you are well, even from a distance. I am not asking for anything more than that." Elena paused at the door, considering his request carefully. Finally, without turning back to face him, she said, "I am well, Damien. I have been well for a long time now, without your knowledge or your concern. That is answer enough." She walked out of the room, leaving him standing alone amid the weight of everything left unsaid, her composed exterior holding firm until she was safely out of sight, at which point her hands finally began trembling with the full force of emotions she had spent years learning to control. In the weeks following the summit, Elena found herself unable to fully push thoughts of Damien from her mind, no matter how determinedly she threw herself into work. She told Fiona nothing of the encounter, unwilling to unravel years of carefully guarded privacy over a single conversation. Yet she noticed her friend watching her with quiet concern, sensing that something had shifted beneath Elena's usual composed exterior. "You have seemed distracted lately," Fiona finally commented one evening as they shared a quiet dinner at a small restaurant near the office. "Ever since that trade summit, did something happen there?" Elena considered deflecting, as she usually did, But the accumulated weight of years spent carrying her past entirely alone finally shifted something within her. "I ran into someone from my past," she admitted quietly. "Someone I did not expect to see again, and definitely was not prepared to face." "A bad someone, or a complicated someone?" Fiona asked gently, giving Elena space to share as much or as little as she wished. "Complicated," Elena said after a long pause. "Very complicated." She did not elaborate further, and Fiona, respecting the boundaries Elena had maintained for years, did not press for more details. But the conversation stayed with Elena long after dinner ended, a small crack in the careful walls she had built, reminding her that perhaps complete isolation from her past was not entirely healthy, even if reconnecting with it remained impossible. Meanwhile, Damien returned to Blackthorn territory, carrying the weight of Elena's cold, controlled rejection, understanding fully that he had no right to expect anything different after the pain he had caused her. Yet knowing she was alive, knowing she had built a successful and stable life, brought him a strange combination of relief and renewed determination. She was well, she was safe, and she was close enough now, within the same professional circles at least, that perhaps some path toward earning back even a fraction of her trust remained possible. He did not immediately pursue further contact, understanding that pushing too hard too quickly would only confirm every reason Elena had for maintaining her distance. Instead, he focused on continuing the difficult work of rebuilding Blackthorn's stability, using the painful lessons of the past 5 years to become the kind of leader he should have been from the beginning, one who valued honest counsel over convenient comfort, who questioned easy explanations rather than accepting them without real scrutiny. 3 months after the summit, an unexpected complication arose that would force Elena and Damien back into direct contact, whether either of them wished for it or not. A dangerous situation began developing along the border between Blackthorn territory and a neighboring pack, remnants of Seraphine's old network, individuals who had profited from her manipulation and now faced exposure and punishment now that her schemes had unraveled, began organizing a resistance effort designed to destabilize Blackthorn further and potentially seize control through the ensuing chaos. This resistance effort directly threatened trade routes managed by Ravenhall Trade Consortium, placing Elena's professional responsibilities on a direct collision course with the unresolved personal history she had hoped to keep permanently separated from her current life. Her supervisors at Ravenhall, unaware of any personal connection to Blackthorn's Alpha King, assigned her to lead the negotiation team tasked with resolving the border crisis, recognizing her unmatched expertise in pack politics as exactly the skill needed to navigate such a delicate and dangerous situation. Elena considered requesting reassignment, citing any number of professional reasons that might justify avoiding direct involvement with Blackthorn territory. But doing so risked raising questions about her sudden reluctance, questions that might eventually expose the very past she had worked so hard to keep hidden. Additionally, a stubborn part of her recognized that her unique understanding of the situation, understanding built through years of first-hand experience within that very pack, made her genuinely the best qualified person for this difficult assignment. She accepted the assignment, steeling herself for the inevitable direct contact with Damien that resolving this crisis would require. Their working relationship, she promised herself, would remain strictly professional, focused entirely on resolving the border conflict efficiently and effectively, with no room allowed for the complicated emotions still lingering beneath her carefully maintained composure. Damien, upon learning that Ravenhall had assigned Elena to lead the negotiation team, felt a complex mixture of anxiety and cautious hope. This assignment would require sustained direct contact over what promised to be weeks, or possibly months of careful negotiation, an opportunity, however professionally framed, to demonstrate through consistent action, rather than mere words, the genuine change he had undergone since her exile. He resolved to approach their working relationship with strict professionalism, respecting the clear boundaries Elena had established during their previous encounter, while remaining alert for any small opportunity to show her, through patient and consistent behavior, that he had truly become a different man than the one who had failed her so completely 5 years earlier. Their first joint negotiation session took place at a neutral location along the disputed border, both parties bringing teams of advisors and security personnel given the ongoing threat posed by Seraphine's remaining allies. Elena arrived precisely on schedule, professionally dressed, her expression carefully neutral, as she greeted the assembled representatives from both territories. "Director Marsh," Damien said formally, extending a respectful handshake that Elena accepted with matching professionalism, neither betraying any hint of their complicated shared history to the observing advisors and officials. "Alpha King Wolf," Elena replied evenly. "Let us begin by reviewing the current status of the border dispute and identifying priority areas requiring immediate resolution." The negotiation session proceeded with careful, businesslike efficiency, Elena's expertise proving immediately valuable as she identified underlying tensions and potential compromise solutions that other negotiators had entirely overlooked. Damien found himself watching her work with a mixture of professional admiration and painful nostalgia, recognizing familiar patterns of sharp intelligence and steady confidence that had once defined her role as his trusted Luna, now redirected entirely toward serving interests that no longer included him personally. As the weeks progressed and negotiations continued, Elena and Damien found themselves working in increasingly close proximity, sharing long strategy sessions and difficult decisions that required trust and mutual understanding, despite the painful history between them. Elena maintained her professional boundaries with disciplined consistency, yet found herself, almost against her will, occasionally noticing genuine changes in Damien's demeanor and leadership style, changes that suggested real growth rather than superficial performance, designed to win back her favor. He listened more carefully to dissenting opinions during their joint strategy meetings. He questioned assumptions rather than accepting convenient explanations without scrutiny. He treated pack members from both territories with consistent respect, regardless of their rank or influence. Slowly, reluctantly, Elena began to acknowledge that perhaps the man before her genuinely had learned from the catastrophic mistake that had cost them both so dearly. Yet acknowledging his growth and forgiving the pain he had caused remained two very different things, and Elena guarded carefully against allowing professional respect to blur into something more dangerous, something that risked reopening wounds she had worked so hard to heal over 5 long, difficult years. The border crisis escalated sharply during the 9th week of negotiations, when scouts from Blackthorn discovered evidence of an organized attack being planned by Seraphine's remaining network, timed deliberately to coincide with a scheduled diplomatic gathering meant to formalize the new trade agreements Elena and Damien's teams had worked so hard to establish. Marissa, who had continued serving as head healer and remained closely connected to pack security matters, brought the intelligence directly to Damien late one evening, her expression grave with concern. "They plan to strike during the formal signing ceremony," she reported. "Enough coordinated warriors to overwhelm our standard security arrangements, using the chaos to seize control of key pack resources, while everyone is distracted by the diplomatic event." Damien immediately called an emergency meeting, bringing together his security council alongside Elena's negotiation team, recognizing that protecting the fragile peace they had worked to build required full cooperation between both territories, rather than treating this as solely a Blackthorn problem to solve independently. Elena arrived at the emergency meeting with her usual composed efficiency, though the gravity of the situation was evident in the tightness around her eyes. "How certain is this intelligence?" she asked Marissa directly, old familiarity slipping briefly into her tone, before she caught herself and adjusted back toward professional distance. "Confirmed through 3 independent sources," Marissa replied, her own expression showing surprise at hearing Elena's familiar directness again after so many years apart, though she quickly refocused on the urgent matter at hand. "We have perhaps 4 days to prepare an adequate response." The room fell into intense strategic discussion, various security officials proposing different approaches ranging from canceling the signing ceremony entirely to significantly increasing visible security in hopes of deterring the planned attack. Elena listened carefully to each proposal before finally speaking. "Canceling the ceremony only delays the problem and signals weakness that will embolden further attempts," she said. "Increasing visible security will simply cause them to adjust their approach or target a different, less protected moment. We need a strategy that allows the ceremony to proceed while neutralizing the threat before it can properly execute." Damien looked at her with a mixture of relief and old familiar respect, recognizing the same sharp strategic thinking that had once made her invaluable during their years ruling together. "What do you propose?" he asked. Elena outlined a plan involving carefully disguised security personnel positioned throughout the ceremony under the guise of catering and support staff, combined with strategic misdirection, suggesting heightened security in locations away from the actual event, drawing potential attackers into a false sense of confidence about their planned approach. The assembled council debated the plan's details late into the night, refining specific elements while building consensus around the overall strategic approach. Throughout the discussion, Elena and Damien found themselves working in close, natural coordination, old patterns of mutual trust and complementary thinking, reasserting themselves, despite the years and painful history separating them. As the meeting finally concluded near midnight, most attendees departing to prepare for the days ahead, Elena remained briefly behind to review final logistics with Marissa. Damien lingered as well, watching the two old friends interact with genuine warmth, despite years of separation. "It is good to see you again," Marissa said quietly to Elena, once the last of the security officials had departed. "I have thought of you often these past years, wondered how you were faring, hoped desperately that you had found some measure of peace." "I found more than peace," Elena said, allowing genuine warmth into her voice for the first time since returning to territory connected with Blackthorn. "I built an entirely new life, a good one." "I am glad," Marissa said sincerely. "You deserve that, after everything." Damien, standing nearby, absorbed this exchange with quiet attention, understanding more clearly than ever the depth of what his choices had cost. Not just his marriage, but Elena's entire life and community, as she had once known it. Yet he also recognized, watching her interact naturally with Marissa, glimpses of resilience and strength that suggested the woman before him had transformed her pain into something powerful, rather than allowing it to define or limit her. Over the following 4 days, preparations for both the diplomatic ceremony and the hidden security response consumed nearly every waking hour. Elena and Damien found themselves working side by side constantly, coordinating logistics, reviewing security positions, and finalizing contingency plans for various scenarios that might unfold during the anticipated confrontation. During a late evening planning session on the 3rd day, exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. The accumulated stress of the crisis, combined with the underlying emotional tension of their complicated shared history, wearing down the careful professional boundaries they had both maintained so diligently. "You have changed," Elena said quietly, breaking a comfortable silence as they reviewed final security positions spread across a large map table. "I did not expect that, honestly. I expected excuses, or perhaps some attempt to use this crisis to manipulate my sympathy. I have had 5 years to understand exactly how badly I failed you," Damien said, his voice carrying genuine humility rather than defensive justification. "I cannot undo what happened, but I can commit to never repeating those same failures, regardless of whether that commitment ever earns back anything between us." Elena studied him carefully, searching for any sign of manipulation or performance, finding instead what appeared to be genuine, hard-won growth. "The pack seems stronger for it," she acknowledged. "Corbin mentioned significant improvements in how decisions are made now. More voices considered, less concentration of unchecked authority. Your absence taught me lessons I should have understood while you were still here to teach them," Damien said. "I am sorry it took losing you so completely to finally learn what real leadership requires." The vulnerability in his admission hung heavily in the quiet room between them, neither immediately breaking the charged silence that followed. Finally, Elena straightened, deliberately re-establishing the professional distance that felt safer than whatever complicated emotions threatened to surface in that quiet, exhausted moment. "We should focus on finalizing these security positions," she said. "The ceremony is only 1 day away now." Damien nodded, respecting her clear signal to redirect their conversation back towards safer, professional territory. Though something had shifted subtly between them during that brief exchange, a small crack forming in the careful walls Elena had maintained so successfully for 5 long years. The day of the diplomatic ceremony arrived with clear skies and deceptive calm, the grand courtyard of Blackthorn's main hall decorated for what appeared to be a straightforward celebration of renewed peace between territories. Beneath the festive appearance, however, carefully disguised security personnel remained alert at every strategic position, watching for the first sign of the planned attack Marissa's intelligence had warned them about. Elena stood near the ceremonial platform, dressed formally for her role, representing Ravenhall Trade Consortium, her posture calm and professional despite the underlying tension she carried, knowing that danger could erupt at any moment during the carefully orchestrated proceedings. Damien stood nearby in his formal Alpha King attire, equally composed despite similar awareness of the threat lurking beneath the ceremony's peaceful surface. The attack came exactly as intelligence had predicted, roughly 20 minutes into the formal signing proceedings, when a group of armed individuals disguised among the invited guests suddenly revealed weapons and attempted to seize control of the ceremonial platform. Chaos erupted as legitimate guests scattered in alarm, providing exactly the confusion the attackers had hoped to exploit. But the disguised security personnel, positioned precisely according to Elena's strategic plan, moved swiftly and efficiently to neutralize the threat before it could gain any real momentum. Within minutes, the attackers found themselves surrounded and overwhelmed, their planned chaos, instead resulting in swift capture and complete failure of their intended coup. Throughout the brief but intense confrontation, Elena and Damien worked in seamless coordination, directing security responses and ensuring the safety of legitimate guests with the same natural partnership that had once defined their years ruling together. When the immediate danger had finally passed, both stood slightly breathless amid the aftermath, adrenaline still coursing through their systems, as security personnel secured the captured attackers and began restoring order to the shaken ceremony. "Your plan worked perfectly," Damien said, turning to Elena with genuine admiration evident in his expression. "You saved countless lives today, including mine." "We saved them together," Elena corrected, though she allowed herself a small, genuine smile at the successful resolution of the crisis they had spent days carefully preparing for. "Your security teams executed the plan flawlessly." In the days following the failed attack, the remaining members of Seraphine's network were systematically identified and brought to justice, finally closing the chapter of chaos and manipulation that had plagued Blackthorn for years. The Pack Council, grateful for Elena's crucial role in preventing what could have been a devastating tragedy, requested a formal ceremony to honor her contribution. Elena initially resisted the idea, uncomfortable with public recognition tied so closely to a territory and history she had worked so hard to separate herself from. But Corbin, along with Marissa and several other Pack members who remembered her genuine dedication during her years as Luna, insisted that proper acknowledgement was long overdue, not just for her recent assistance, but for the years of unjust exile she had suffered due to the Pack's own failures. The formal ceremony took place 1 week later, the Great Hall filled once again with Pack members, though this time the atmosphere carried none of the fear and uncertainty that had characterized Elena's final appearance in that same room 5 years earlier. Elder Corbin stood before the assembled crowd, his expression solemn, as he prepared to address a wrong that had gone uncorrected for far too long. 5 years ago, in this very hall, we failed a woman who had given this pack nothing but loyalty and dedication, Corbin began, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room. We allowed manipulation and convenient lies to override truth and justice, and in doing so, we exiled an innocent woman who deserved better from every single one of us. Elena stood near the front of the hall, her expression carefully composed, despite the emotional weight of hearing her exile, formally acknowledged, as the injustice it had always been. Damien stood beside Corbin, his own expression grave, with the accumulated guilt of 5 years, understanding that this moment required more from him than simple attendance. "Elena," Damien said, stepping forward from his position beside Corbin, his voice carrying clearly, despite the emotion evident beneath its surface. "What I am about to do, I do not do lightly, nor do I expect it to erase the pain I caused you. But I owe you this, and I owe this pack the example of true accountability that I failed to demonstrate 5 years ago." To the visible shock of everyone assembled, Damien slowly lowered himself to one knee before Elena, right there in the great hall where he had once coldly exiled her, in front of the entire Pack Council and gathered witnesses. Gasps rippled through the crowd, no one having anticipated such a dramatic and public display from their Alpha King. "I failed you completely," Damien said, his voice steady, despite the vulnerability of his position. "I chose comfortable lies over difficult truth. I let my own weakness and fear override the trust you had earned through years of genuine partnership and love. I am asking, not as your Alpha King, but simply as the man who failed you for the chance to earn back even a small measure of the trust I destroyed so completely. He paused, looking directly into her eyes despite his kneeling position. If it would help repair even part of what I broke, I am prepared to step down from my position entirely, to relinquish leadership of this pack to someone more deserving of the trust it requires. I understand if that offer means nothing to you now, but I needed you to know I mean every word of this apology, without condition or expectation of anything in return. The Great Hall remained absolutely silent, every eye fixed on the extraordinary sight of their Alpha King kneeling before the woman he had once exiled, offering to surrender his very throne as proof of his genuine remorse. Elena stood frozen for a long moment, processing the weight of this unprecedented public gesture, feeling the accumulated pain and healing of 5 difficult years converging into this single, unexpected moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying clearly, despite the emotion tightening her throat. "Stand up, Damien," she said quietly. "This pack needs its Alpha King, especially now, as it continues healing from years of manipulation and instability. Stepping down would not repair anything. It would simply create new problems for people who have already suffered enough." Damien rose slowly, watching her carefully, uncertain what her response meant, for the deeper question of forgiveness that remained unanswered beneath the practical matter of pack leadership. "Then what would help?" he asked quietly. "Tell me what I can do to earn even the smallest measure of your trust again." Elena considered his question seriously, aware that the entire hall waited breathlessly for her response. Aware, too, that this moment, however dramatic and public, ultimately came down to a decision only she could make for herself. "Time," she finally said. "Consistent action over time, not grand gestures made in front of an audience. If you truly wish to earn back anything between us, it will happen slowly, through ordinary days and honest choices, not through dramatic apologies, however sincere they may be." It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was not rejection either. It was something more honest than either extreme, an acknowledgement that trust, once shattered so completely, could not be rebuilt through a single moment, however dramatic, but only through the patient accumulation of proven reliability across many ordinary days. In the months that followed the ceremony, Elena returned to her life in Ashwick, continuing her work with Ravenhall Trade Consortium, while maintaining professional contact with Blackthorn territory, as their ongoing trade partnership required. She did not rush back into any personal relationship with Damien, holding firm to the boundaries she had established, insisting that any rebuilding of trust would happen gradually, through demonstrated consistency rather than emotional urgency. Damien honored that boundary completely, never pushing for more than Elena offered, never using his position or their shared history to pressure her toward faster reconciliation than she felt ready for. He communicated with her regularly regarding pack business, always professional, always respectful, yet gradually, through small consistent gestures, began demonstrating the genuine change he claimed to have undergone. He remembered details from their conversations, without being reminded. He followed through reliably on commitments made during their professional discussions. He treated her with unwavering respect during every interaction, never once allowing old familiarity to slip into inappropriate presumption about the current boundaries of their relationship. Slowly, month by month, Elena found herself genuinely believing that his transformation was real, not merely a temporary performance designed to win back what he had lost. Marissa remained a steady bridge between Elena's old and new lives, visiting occasionally when business brought her near Ashwick, sharing news of the pack's continued healing and Damien's consistent leadership improvements, without ever pressuring Elena toward any particular decision about her own path forward. Fiona, too, eventually learned more of Elena's complicated history, offering steady friendship and honest perspective as Elena worked through the difficult process of deciding what she truly wanted for her future. "You do not owe him anything," Fiona reminded her gently one evening, nearly a year after the initial reunion at the trade summit. "Whatever he has become, whatever growth he has shown, you built an entire life without him. That life has value entirely independent of whether you ever choose to let him back into it." "I know," Elena said thoughtfully. "That is exactly why I am considering it so carefully. I am not the desperate, grieving woman he exiled 5 years ago. Whatever decision I make now, it needs to come from genuine choice, not from old loneliness or unresolved longing." Elena spent considerable time reflecting on what she truly wanted, weighing her hard-won independence and the successful life she had built entirely on her own terms against the genuine connection she still felt with Damien, a connection that had never fully disappeared, despite years of determined distance. She recognized, through careful and honest self-reflection, that choosing to reconnect with him, if she ultimately made that choice, needed to happen because it genuinely enriched the strong, independent life she had built, not because it replaced or diminished it. Nearly 18 months after their initial reunion, Elena finally reached a decision she felt genuinely confident in. She requested a private meeting with Damien, traveling to Blackthorn territory for the first time since her exile, under circumstances entirely of her own choosing, rather than professional necessity. They met in the same private conference room where their difficult conversation had first taken place after the trade summit, though the atmosphere between them now carried none of the raw tension that had defined that earlier meeting. Damien greeted her with careful warmth, having learned through months of patient consistency exactly how to balance genuine care with continued respect for her boundaries. "I have thought carefully about everything that has happened between us," Elena began, settling into the chair across from him. "About who I was 5 years ago, who I have become since then, and what I genuinely want for my future going forward." Damien waited quietly, giving her the space to continue without interruption, exactly the kind of patient respect that had gradually rebuilt whatever fragile trust now existed between them. "I am not the same woman you exiled," Elena continued. "I have built a life I am genuinely proud of, independent of you, independent of Blackthorn, independent of any title or position tied to being your Luna. That life matters to me deeply, and I have no intention of abandoning it or diminishing it for anyone, including you." "I would never ask you to," Damien said quietly. "Whatever happens between us, your independence and the life you built deserve nothing but respect and support." Elena nodded, appreciating his response, before continuing. "That said, I have watched you these past months, and I genuinely believe the change I have seen is real. You have earned, through consistent and honest action, something I did not think possible 18 months ago. Not complete forgiveness, not yet, but genuine respect, and perhaps the beginning of something that could grow into more, if we are both willing to build it slowly and honestly, on entirely new terms." Hope flickered visibly across Damien's expression, carefully restrained but unmistakably present. "What terms would those be?" he asked gently. "I will not simply return to being Luna Elena, resuming exactly where we left off as though 5 years never happened," Elena said firmly. "I will maintain my career, my independence, my life in Ashwick, at least for now. If we build something new between us, it will exist alongside that life, not replace it, and it will move at whatever pace feels right to me, without pressure or urgency, regardless of pack expectations or political convenience." "Those terms sound entirely fair," Damien said, relief and cautious joy evident in his voice. "I am simply grateful for any chance to prove myself worthy of rebuilding something real with you, on whatever terms you need." Elena allowed herself a genuine smile, the first true smile she had offered him since her exile 5 years earlier. "Then perhaps we can begin again," she said, slowly, honestly, as equals this time, rather than assuming old patterns that clearly failed us both. Over the following months, Elena and Damien carefully rebuilt their relationship on these new, healthier foundations, dividing time between her established life in Ashwick and his responsibilities within Blackthorn territory, never rushing toward any predetermined outcome, allowing genuine trust to develop naturally, through consistent honesty, rather than dramatic gestures or desperate urgency. Eventually, nearly 2 years after their initial reunion, Elena chose to formally return to Blackthorn territory, though not simply as Damien's wife reclaiming her old title. She returned as Elena Marsh Voss, bringing with her the professional expertise and independent identity she had built during her exile, taking on a formal role overseeing trade relations and diplomatic policy, a position created specifically to honor both her hard-won skills and her insistence on maintaining genuine purpose, beyond simply being someone's Luna. The Pack Council, learning from the painful lessons of the past, welcomed her return with genuine celebration rather than mere political convenience. Corbin, now elderly but still sharp, personally presided over the ceremony reinstating her position, making certain this time that proper acknowledgement of her strength, wisdom, and resilience accompanied every part of the formal proceedings. Elena stood once again in the great hall where her exile had begun 5 years earlier, but this time, surrounded by genuine warmth and respect rather than fear and manipulation, she understood clearly that she had not simply returned to her old life. She had built something entirely new, forged through genuine hardship and hard-won independence, choosing this life and this partnership not from desperation or lingering old habit, but from clear-eyed, confident choice. Damien stood beside her, no longer the distant, easily manipulated alpha king who had failed her so completely, but a wiser leader who had learned, through painful and difficult experience, the true cost of choosing convenient comfort over genuine trust. Together, they faced their pack and their shared future, not as the same two people who had once nearly destroyed everything through fear and manipulation, but as equals who had each grown through hardship into stronger, wiser versions of themselves. The broken king had finally earned his queen back, not through crown or title, but through patient, honest transformation. And Elena, the woman once exiled and broken, stood tall, not as someone who had simply been restored to her old position, but as someone who had rebuilt herself entirely, choosing her own path forward with the strength and clarity that only true resilience could provide.